Lawyers for the WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange are in court today for what could be his final bid to avoid extradition to the United States over his leaking of military secrets. Joining me now to discuss this is Foreign Affairs columnist at The Independent, Mary Dejevsky. Good morning to you, Mary.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us. I think that sounds a little bit low. I hope we can adjust the volume there. Now, look, this has been going on for, a huge amount of time. We all remember, of course, when the WikiLeaks revelations were made, showing, extraordinary US military secrets, exposing an awful lot of things that the US government did not want us to know about. We saw him in the Ecuadorian embassy for, 7 years? He's been in prison ever since after breaching on bail conditions. The US are desperate to extradite him to charge him on espionage charges and conspiracy to hack US military computers. The question is, I think a lot of people wondering is, how is it that Julian Assange could possibly have committed a crime against the US state? He's not a US citizen. He's an Australian citizen. He wasn't in the US at the time. What on earth, what hold does the US have? What requirement do they have on foreign citizens out of their jurisdiction to obey their laws?
Well, I think that the United States would probably argue that its interests were damaged by the huge amount of revelations that came out via WikiLeaks. Now, the central argument that Julian Assange has represented all this time has been exactly the argument you presented in a way, that he wasn't revealing these secrets, he was merely the publisher. So he hadn't leaked them, he was the publisher, and therefore this wasn't, as it were, an international crime in which the Americans had any interest at all. Obviously, that's not their point of view. And it looks as though they want to prosecute him in the United States under their Espionage Act, which is very, very serious and could leave him in prison for a very long time if he were extradited.
These absurd sentences they get in American courts, 175 years maximum. Of course, he wouldn't live that long, but basically spending the rest of his life behind bars. Big concerns about him being put in isolation and the like. Now, we know that Chelsea Manning, who was the US Army intelligence analyst who basically hacked into the computers and released those documents, was charged and then later, served time and later released. That, I suppose, a lot of people think is the end of it. It's very difficult. Julian Assange is an extraordinarily, I think, unsympathetic character. An egomaniac. There were these, I believe, questionable charges that they brought and then dropped against him by the Swedish police over rape charges. He's not a very likeable character. I think a lot of us who think that it was very, very important to us to know what was really going on, and some of the footage and some of the information released by WikiLeaks was vital, I think, in a free society. But he also put a lot of people in harm's way, working with The Guardian and other and American newspapers. They wanted to redact some of the information to make sure that names of spies and innocent civilians were not in those documents. He just released the whole lot. He put people's lives at risk, and I think that was an awful thing for him to do. But I do find it extraordinary that someone, as you say, acting as a publisher should face charges in America, and that the British government should consider this extradition. That his own Australian government, they have said they want to take him back to Australia. They don't want him extradited. Would that not be the simplest solution?
Well, there is a view that says that even if extradition were actually allowed, that there would be an argument for him actually being sent to Australia to serve his sentence, and that then he might be released the moment he landed on Australian soil. But I would take issue just with one thing that you said, which was about the non-redacted information, because both Assange's wife, Stella, and her lawyer and legal advisor both insist that Julian was very, very careful about redactions, and that he was actually more careful than some of the media that wanted to publish what his what he'd revealed, and that actually there was quite a bit of tension between Julian Assange trying to be more cautious
Yeah.
about what was
So, yes,
revealed
so
and
it's a bit of a he
redacting.
said, she said on that case. In terms of what
Yeah,
happens today, it's today and tomorrow. It's a two-day hearing. And this is the High Court deciding whether or not Julian Assange can appeal this extradition. If he loses, he can still take his case to the European Court, can't he? But there's a concern by his supporters, and I know you were with his wife Stella yesterday at an event, that
yeah.
actually that would be too slow and he could already be extradited to the States. But we know also that the final decision on an extradition will go to the government. This will be the Home Secretary's decision.
Well, yes, but I think that the European Court issue is very, very interesting because I think Stella Assange, she fears that the UK might actually ignore or anticipate the case going to Strasbourg by, as it were, extraditing Assange before and ignoring anything, either because of the delay or because of a decision that might be accelerated, say, in Strasbourg, that the UK government might extradite nonetheless.
Yeah.
And that, of course, creates a very interesting precedent for the Rwanda asylum issue, because until now, the British have been quite, or at least have said that they tend to observe European court
Yeah, but
rulings.
wouldn't it be
And if
interesting
they
if it
breached it in this case, that's a
there'd be the
precedent.
opposite?